For 10 years, he had been the janitor of the same apartment building. Every day he saw the same residents, greeted them politely, collected trash, cleaned the stairs. Residents only called him Janitor Uncle. Nobody knew he was a former homicide detective, or that he had solved over 200 murder cases in the city, until the young couple in apartment 8A suddenly disappeared. Welcome to Hidden Page Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. Frank Morrison was 68 years old and was the janitor of Maple Heights Apartments, an old brick building, 3 stories, 12 apartments, in a quiet neighborhood close to the city center. Frank came to work at 6 a.m. every morning and went home at 6 p.m. His routine was always the same. First, he would sweep the stairs, then check the mailboxes, collect trash, do small repairs. When he encountered residents, he would say good morning, good evening. He didn't talk much, focused on his work. The building residents loved him. He was reliable, solved problems quickly, never complained. They called him Uncle Frank. "What would this building do without our Uncle Frank?" they would say, laughing. But Frank's eyes were different. They were constantly moving, noticing every detail. Who was coming and going when? What unusual sounds were in which apartment? Whose behavior had changed? He had never abandoned these habits. The apartment residents weren't aware of this. For them, Frank was just the janitor. Silent, reliable, unnoticed. Until that weekend when everything changed. A young couple lived in apartment 8A. Emily and Jason Carter, 28 and 30 years old. Emily was a teacher. Jason worked at a marketing company. They had been living here for 3 years. Quiet and orderly tenants. Every morning at 7:30, they would leave together, return home around 6 p.m. Emily went to yoga class on Saturday mornings. Jason went running on Sundays. Their routines were precise, predictable. Monday morning, Frank was cleaning the stairs as usual. He looked at 8A's door. The mailboxes had been full since Saturday morning. 3 days of newspapers, bills, advertisements. This wasn't normal, Frank thought. He had seen Emily leaving with her yoga bag Saturday morning, but he hadn't seen her return. He hadn't seen Jason since Sunday morning either. Maybe they had gone on a trip. But they usually informed Frank. "Uncle Frank, we'll be back in a week. If you could collect the mail," they would say. Tuesday morning, Frank was more careful. He listened at 8A's door. No sound came from inside. No television sound, radio sound, footsteps, none of them. Silence. Wednesday morning, Frank began to worry. 4 days of mail, no sound, no movement. This was very unusual for this couple. Old habits began to stir in Frank's mind. Missing persons protocols, the 24-hour rule, contacting families, last seen location and time. But now he was just a janitor, not police. Frank Morrison's police career began in 1976. First as a beat cop, then detective. Finally, he worked in the homicide unit. For 31 years, he had fought crime. As a homicide detective, his specialty was missing persons cases. Most of the time, missing people had just run away from debts, relationships, problems. But sometimes something bad had happened. Frank had solved over 200 murder cases. Most were open and clear, evidence obvious. But the hardest were those that turned from missing persons to homicide. Missing person, found corpse, mystery solved. He retired in 2007. Age had come, health problems had started, but most importantly, he was tired. Every murder, every corpse, every family tragedy had worn him down a little more. When he found the janitor job, he was relieved. Calm, routine, a job where no one got hurt, minimal contact with people, low responsibility. It was perfect. But now, the disappearance of Emily and Jason Carter had awakened his old instincts. And Frank knew this wasn't just travel. Wednesday afternoon, Frank gathered courage and went up to 8A. He listened at the door. Complete silence. He rang the doorbell. No answer. He rang again, still no answer. Frank had keys for emergencies, but legally he couldn't enter, only in real emergencies. He looked under the door. The interior was dark, curtains closed, no light. But there was a smell. Faint, unpleasant smell. Frank recognized the smell. Decay. It could be food scraps, but it could be something else too. That evening as Frank went home, he looked at 8A's windows. Always closed, dark. He checked their cars. Emily's Honda Civic and Jason's BMW both were in the parking space. This was a bad sign. People usually traveled with their cars. If they were using a plane, they would park their cars elsewhere. Frank went home but couldn't sleep. Scenarios were forming in his mind. Accident, illness, escape, or something worse. Thursday morning, Frank decided to be more systematic. He would act like in his old detective days. First, he checked the apartment records. Emily and Jason had emergency contact information. Emily's mother lived in Boston. Jason's brother lived in Chicago. Frank started talking to neighbors, casually, without arousing suspicion. The elderly couple in 7A, the Smiths, we heard sounds from them Saturday night, like arguing, but not clear. The young man in 9A, Kevin, I saw Jason going upstairs Sunday morning. He seemed to be in a hurry. The mother and child in 8B, Janet. Emily looked very tense over the weekend. Normally she's very cheerful, but this time was different. Frank was taking notes. He was creating a timeline in his mind. Saturday morning. Emily goes to yoga class. Saturday night. Arguing sounds. Sunday morning. Jason leaves in a hurry. Sunday night. Last sighting. This pattern was familiar to Frank. He often saw such developments in relationship violence cases. Friday morning, Frank wasn't sure anymore. Should he call police? But there was no definitive evidence yet. Maybe they really were traveling. Frank went up to 8A again. This time he examined the door lock more carefully. There were scratches. They looked fresh, as if someone had done lock-picking. Frank remembered his old police tools. He still had lock picks at home, left over from the old days. It wasn't legal, but... That afternoon, Frank went home, got his tools. After his shift ended, he returned to the apartment. 11 p.m. Everyone was asleep. He went up to 8A. He carefully opened the door. He entered. The apartment was dark, but Frank turned on his flashlight. The interior looked normal. Living room clean, kitchen tidy. But that smell was stronger. Frank followed the decay smell. It led to the bedroom. When he opened the bedroom door, the scene he saw shook him. 2 corpses. Emily and Jason were lying in bed. They had been dead for some time. Frank immediately stepped back. Crime scene. Don't contaminate. Call police. But first, he made a quick observation. 2 gunshot wounds. One in Emily, one in Jason. Professional execution. Close range. This wasn't domestic violence. This was murder. Frank immediately called 911. I need to report a double homicide, he said calmly. Police arrived 10 minutes later. Detectives, crime scene team, coroner. The building suddenly turned into a battlefield. Lead detective Lisa Chen questioned Frank. Sir, how did you discover the bodies? Frank explained the situation. Missing person suspicion. Smell. Opening the door. He confessed to illegal entry. What's your background, Mr. Morrison? Detective Chen asked. Retired NYPD. Homicide detective for 15 years. Chen's face changed. You're ex-police? Why didn't you report this earlier? I wasn't sure. Missing adults. No direct evidence of foul play. You know the protocols. Chen nodded. She understood. Frank wanted to look at the crime scene, but Chen refused. You're a witness now, not a detective. But Frank had already seen enough. Professional hit, close range, no signs of struggle. Killers either knew the victims or surprised them. The next day, police had cordoned off the apartment. They were questioning residents, collecting evidence. Frank was trying to maintain his normal routine, but it was difficult. Detective Chen spoke with Frank again. We could use your help, she said. You know the building. You know the residents. Unofficial consultation. Frank hesitated. He was retired, no longer a detective, but Emily and Jason Carter deserved justice. What do you need? Frank asked. Background on the victims, who they associated with, any enemies, financial problems, relationship issues. Frank shared his information. That Emily and Jason were a quiet, normal couple, that he had never seen any problems, but that there were arguing sounds Saturday night. Chen took notes. What's your assessment of the crime scene? Frank thought, professional hit, probably 2 shooters. Quick, clean, no personal items disturbed. This wasn't robbery or a crime of passion. Contract killing? Possible, or organized crime. Victims might have been involved in something they shouldn't have been. Chen nodded. We're looking into their finances, work connections, any possible criminal associations. 3 days later, Chen gave Frank an update. Jason Carter had gambling debts, significant amount, $150,000 to a bookie connected to organized crime. Frank knew what this meant. Gambling debts, mafia connections. Emily and Jason had been killed because of Jason's debts. Do you have suspects? Frank asked. We have names. Vincent Torino, known enforcer. Michael Rossi, his associate. But no solid evidence yet. Frank thought, what about surveillance? The building has cameras. We checked. Someone disabled them Friday night. Professional job. This was also confirmation. Organized hit, meticulously planned. Are you close to arrest? Frank asked. Chen shook her head. Not yet. Need more evidence, witnesses, something solid. Frank couldn't sleep that night. He was doing case review in his mind. Missing pieces, inconsistencies, potential leads. When he woke up in the morning, he had an idea. Frank called Chen. I want to check something, he said. What? The building's garage. The cameras there work independently. They might have caught something. Chen and Frank checked the garage footage together. Friday night, 11:47 p.m., a van appeared at the entrance. License plate muddy, partially covered, but the van model was visible. Saturday morning, 2:23 a.m., the same van at the exit. This time frame fit perfectly with the murder window. Chen got excited. This is our breakthrough. We can trace this van. Traffic records showed the van was registered to Vincent Torino, direct connection. We got him, Chen said. Monday morning, Vincent Torino and Michael Rossi were arrested. With a search warrant, the murder weapon was found in their homes. Ballistics came back positive. Detective Chen informed Frank. Case closed, thanks to your help. Frank felt relief. Justice had been served for Emily and Jason Carter. What happens now? Frank asked. Trial. Hopefully conviction. Life sentences for first-degree murder. Frank nodded. This result wouldn't bring Emily and Jason back, but at least the killers would be punished. After the trial, apartment residents began looking at Frank differently. He was no longer just Uncle Frank. He was a former homicide detective who had solved the case. Frank, were you really police? Asked Mrs. Smith. 31 years, Frank replied. Why didn't you ever mention it? Frank thought, because I was retired. I wasn't that person anymore. But you're still that person. You couldn't save Emily and Jason, but you brought them justice. When Frank heard this, something sparked inside him. Maybe he wasn't completely retired. Maybe he could use his skills to help people. Chen offered Frank private consultation. There are cold cases you could help. Frank was interested. Part-time consulting, using old skills, serving justice. I'll think about it, Frank said. Frank Morrison never wanted fame. He just wanted to do his job and live quietly. But the Emily and Jason Carter case showed him that some skills never fade. Now he's still the apartment janitor. Every day he cleans the stairs, collects trash, but he also solves cold cases as a part-time consultant. Because real detectives don't end with retirement. They just serve justice on a different platform. And Maple Heights Apartments is now one of the safest buildings in the city. Because their janitor doesn't just clean the building, he also cleans up crime. Now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone like Frank? Someone who seemed ordinary but had extraordinary abilities? Share their story in the comments. Because at Hidden Page Stories, we believe heroes are everywhere. If this story moved you, subscribe, share, and help us keep these voices alive. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, if you see someone working quietly in your apartment building, know that their story might be much deeper than you think.